Kash Patel didn't walk onto the view, he strode into it, like a man who's walked through fire and now carries its cold, flickering edge behind his eyes. The lights hit him like searchlights, but his stare never blinked. No hesitation. No smile to disarm. Just that deep blue suit and a plain tie, like armor polished to say, I didn't come here to dance. I came to draw lines. The stage wasn't a studio anymore. It was a coliseum, coiled in tension. The control room buzzed like a war room. Someone whispered into a headset, "Let him talk. Let the audience see what he really is." Down on set, the hosts waited in their seats like a jury already reaching for the gavel. Whoopi, cool, composed, with eyes that sliced. Joy Behar, lips curled in that signature smirk, the one that usually came after the punchline. Sunny Hostin, still, precise, like a drawn bow. The audience? Silent. Breathless. Some leaned forward. Others crossed their arms. No applause yet. Just tension, hanging in the air like a storm before the sirens. Then he appeared. A murmur rippled through the crowd. That's Trump's guy. Joy raised her eyebrows, almost amused. Whoopi tilted her head, unimpressed. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought this was a chessboard, and Patel? Just another pawn on the wrong team. But as he took his seat, calm and upright, one thing became clear. He didn't come to play defense. Whoopi, smile gracious, but voice deliberate, opened the show like a hostess opening the gates to a lion's den. Welcome to The View. Today's conversation? One you do not want to miss. Please welcome our guest, FBI Director, former National Security Advisor, and author of Government Gangsters, Mr. Kash Patel. Polite applause. Muted. Uneven. A couple stiff claps. A cough. Someone booed quietly. Someone else hissed, "Let's see what he has to say." Kash tilted his head in acknowledgement, offering a faint, diplomatic smile. But his eyes? Laser still. No charm. No flinch. "Thanks for having me," he said, voice low, smooth, but sharp. "I'm here for a real conversation." A few in the audience nodded. Others stared, measuring him like a fuse. Joy leaned back, arms crossed. This was going to be fun. Whoopi wasted no time. She dropped the niceties like a silk glove on a courtroom floor. "Kash, you've made headlines suggesting journalists should be prosecuted for spreading misinformation about elections. Let me ask you straight. Do you actually believe throwing reporters in jail is going to fix democracy? Or are we looking at a nice way to shut down dissent?" Boom. First shot fired. The audience murmured again, tension humming like feedback in a mic. Kash didn't blink. He leaned in, elbows on the table, like someone about to break apart a ticking bomb with his bare hands. "Prosecution isn't about shutting up voices," he said evenly. "It's about holding liars accountable. When an outlet knowingly spreads lies, real, demonstrable lies, about our elections to confuse, manipulate, or divide, that's not journalism. That's damage. And we don't ignore damage just because someone slapped a press badge on it." A moment's silence, then a few claps, tight, deliberate. A pocket of the audience gave him a nod, but others frowned, shifted in their seats. Sunny Hostin, sharp as ever, leaned forward. Her voice cut through like a judge's gavel. "And who gets to decide what's a lie? You? The government? That's not justice, that's censorship. And forgive me, but the First Amendment doesn't bend to political power." The crowd perked up, boos rippled. A whistle from the back row. Kash met her gaze directly. "No, the First Amendment doesn't bend. But it doesn't cover fraud either. Fabricating evidence, inciting chaos with doctored information, that's not protected speech. That's criminal manipulation. We're not talking about controversial opinions. We're talking about deliberate deceit dressed up as reporting." More claps now. Hesitant, but louder. A man in the third row muttered, "He's got a point." Joy Behar jumped in, tones soaked in irony. "So, what now? The FBI becomes the Ministry of Truth? You show up at the newsroom with a warrant every time someone criticizes the White House? Sounds less like justice and more like a bad reboot of a dystopian movie. Laughter from the crowd. A woman clapped twice, sarcastically. Kash turned slightly toward Joy, almost smiling, but not quite. Joy, if someone's criticizing the government, that's democracy. But if they're inventing crimes, fabricating sources, hijacking public trust to drive a political hit job, that's not free speech. That's just plain fraud. And my job, whether you like it or not, is to enforce the law, not ignore it when it wears a press pass. Whoopi raised her eyebrows. The table had shifted. Joy's smirk wavered. Sunny opened her mouth, then paused. And in that beat, just a breath long, the view wasn't in control anymore. Kash Patel turned slowly toward Joy Behar, his gaze razor-sharp, but cool as stone. No blinking. No nerves. Just that unnerving calm of someone who's been cross-examined by Congress and liked it. Miss Behar, he said, tone quiet but cutting, I'm not out to muzzle critics. Criticism is democracy's lifeblood. But when someone twists media power into a weapon, to fabricate, to manipulate, to undermine elections, they don't get a free pass. Accountability doesn't pick sides. And neither do I. That last line hit like a spark in dry brush. The audience stirred. Murmurs began to rise, some nodding, others exchanging skeptical glances. Somewhere in the second row, he's got nerve, I'll give him that. Then Jessica Mort entered the fray. You sound reasonable, she said, voice coated in suspicion, but let's talk about trust. You're Trump's guy. Truth Social. The Nunez memo. You expect us to believe your FBI won't target anti-Trump outlets first. She folded her arms, daring him to deflect. Kash didn't flinch. He smiled, a thin, deliberate gesture. Not to charm. To anchor. To stay in rhythm. Miss Navarro, he replied evenly, the FBI doesn't belong to me. Or Trump. Or anyone. It belongs to the people. Every investigation I lead will be based on evidence, not vendettas. I don't keep an enemies list. Just the law. A few scattered claps echoed, unexpectedly. A man near the back raised an eyebrow, muttering, that's a better answer than I thought. Margaret leaned in now, her voice sharp but sincere, like a scalpel, not a hammer. Kash, I understand where you're coming from. But let's be honest, when people hear prosecute journalists, it sends a chill down their spine. Even if you mean well, don't you think your rhetoric might be undermining the very trust the FBI needs? A beat passed. Kash turned to her slowly, hands calm on the armrests, like a judge weighing the case. Margaret, I hear that fear. I do. But trust isn't rebuilt by pretending everything's fine. It's built by facing hard truths. Real journalism, truth seekers, they're national assets. But those who abuse their reach to deceive and divide, that's not journalism. That's sabotage. And I won't ignore sabotage. The audience erupted. Clapping. Whistling. A couple people stood. Producers jolted in their seats. This wasn't in the plan. The camera operator hesitated, unsure whether to pan or cut away. The director's voice snapped through a headset. Don't zoom in, just hold the wide. Hold it. Sunny Hostin, ever precise, didn't let the moment slip. You speak about truth, she said coolly, but you once backed the Italygate theory. A wild conspiracy. How can you stand here as the guardian of truth after that? The crowd inhaled, sharp. A few gasps. Someone whispered, he better have an answer. Kash turned to her, unbothered. His voice steady, resolute. Miss Hostin, I'm not here to litigate the past. I'm here to talk about accountability now. If a media outlet breaks the law, it gets investigated. If it doesn't, it won't. It's that simple. Clear. Transparent. More applause. Louder. Rolling now like thunder across the studio. From the back. Let him talk. Keep going, Kash. Joy Behar blinked. Shuffled her note cards. Her fingers fumbled. She glanced toward the producers, then toward Whoopi. A signal. A plea. Whoopi leaned forward slightly, as if preparing to reassert control, but the rhythm had shifted. The room had shifted. The crowd was no longer neutral. They were leaning in toward Patel. And he didn't bask in it. Didn't push. He just sat there. Calm. Collected. As if behind a desk, not a camera. His hands relaxed, his expression unreadable, watching the hosts like a chess master waiting for the next blunder. The hosts whispered. A brief huddle, Joy, Sonny, Navarro. The gleam in their eyes had dulled. This wasn't the takedown they'd prepared for. Then, Margaret broke the silence again. The only one at the table who'd served under Trump. Her voice was firm. Controlled. Kash, let's be real. You were Trump's right-hand guy. You authored the Nunez memo. You helped launch Truth Social. How can Americans trust that you'll act independently now, that the FBI under you won't just do Trump's bidding? Boom. Direct hit. The kind of question you build a segment around. The studio fell still. Patel leaned forward, just slightly. His voice dropped, deep and forceful, not loud, but impossible to ignore. Miss Griffin, I don't deny my ties to President Trump. I stand by my record. But the FBI is not a campaign arm. It's not a loyalty club. My job is to protect national security, defend the Constitution, and serve every American, regardless of party or president. And I will. The silence was electric. Then, Joy, sharp and ready, pounced. Oh, really? She snapped. You wrote a children's book calling Trump King Donald. That's not independence, that's propaganda with crayons. And now you expect us to buy that you're neutral. Laughter. A few chuckles from the audience. A low, sarcastic cheer. Patel's smile returned. But it didn't soften. It hardened. Behar, that book was a fun story. Not a government memo. But let's not pretend satire makes you a tyrant. My loyalty isn't blind, it's principled. I served under Trump because I believed in his mission, protect the homeland, root out corruption, put America first. That doesn't make me anyone's puppet. Applause again. Less scattered now. More unified. The tide was turning, clearly. Even Whoopi leaned back slightly, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. And then came Jessica Mort, one last swing in her voice, sharp and pointed. But you advised Trump media, a megaphone for his agenda. How do we know your FBI doesn't become a truth social police department, targeting critics and protecting your circle? Kash turned to her. Still, unblinking. His gaze like steel meeting fire. Kash Patel sat tall, unshaken, as Jessica Mort's accusation cut through the studio like a sharp cord. Mr. Patel, your ties to Trump media aren't ancient history, she snapped. You signed books with WWG1WGA, a known QAnon slogan. You showed up at Reawaken America, where conspiracy theories are basically applauded. How can the public trust the FBI under someone who flirts with extremists? The studio held its breath. Lights blazed. A camera tightened on Patel's face. He turned slowly, deliberately, his voice steady and precise. Miss Navarro, I don't get to control what slogans fans ask me to sign. That one? It was a request, not a message. I've attended dozens of events across the political spectrum. Why? Because listening to people, even those I disagree with, is part of the job. That's how you lead. That's how you learn. Murmurs of agreement stirred. Some clapped, hesitant at first, then louder. A woman in the front row nodded and whispered. He's not dodging. Jessica's tone sharpened, more clipped now. You don't get to claim neutrality while showing up at events that push lies. QAnon isn't just controversial, it's a threat. The FBI says so. Patel didn't blink. His reply came clean, without hesitation. And if QAnon or anyone else poses a threat, we'll investigate. That's not up for debate. But showing up to hear what people are saying, that's not endorsement. That's awareness. I'd rather understand than pretend problems don't exist. The crowd broke again into applause, stronger this time. The control room buzzed with tension. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, voice sharp and surgical. Let's talk about your record, Mr. Patel. You once flirted with Italygate, a theory about foreign interference in the 2020 election. Completely debunked. And now you want to lead the very agency that discredited it. Patel looked directly at her, eyes unwavering. Sunny, I never endorsed any theory. I raised questions when strange intel came across my desk, just like any responsible investigator should. I didn't chase rumors, I examined them. And if they didn't hold water, I dropped them. That's not conspiracy. That's due diligence. Some in the audience clapped. Others leaned in closer, listening more carefully now. Then Patel pivoted to Jessica's earlier jab. His voice lowered slightly, measured, but heavy with conviction. My time with Trump media is no secret. But I walked away from that to serve national security. The FBI doesn't answer to memes or pundits. It answers to the law. If anyone breaks it, left or right, they'll be investigated. End of story. Another surge of applause. A few people now stood, clapping without shame. The studio floor had clearly tilted. Joy Behar narrowed her eyes, voice now brimming with sarcasm. You say you're impartial, but you once called FBI investigators gangsters just because they went after Trump. That's not law and order. That's blind loyalty. Ready to walk that back? Patel's expression didn't change. He answered with the calm of someone who's been called worse behind closed doors. No, Joy. I meant what I said. When FBI officials use their positions to pursue someone without hard evidence, that's an abuse of power. I didn't say that lightly. But I'm not defending Trump. I'm defending the right of every American, any American, to be treated fairly under the law. The room answered before the hosts could cheers. Not just claps this time, actual cheers. A man in the second row raised his fist. Fair is fair. Whoopi Goldberg, trying to reclaim the reins, leaned in. Kash, this all sounds noble. But come on, your closeness to Trump matters. People want to believe in the FBI, but if they see a loyalist at the helm, how do you earn their trust? Patel didn't miss a beat. He turned to her, voice low, grounded. Whoopi, I'm not trying to win a popularity contest. I'm here to uphold the Constitution. Neutrality isn't about appeasement. It's about applying the law evenly, no matter who's in the crosshairs. If you want trust, you have to prove you'll follow the truth even when it's inconvenient. A pause, then applause again, sustained, powerful. The camera captured it this time. The audience had turned. Joy Behar, rattled, shuffled her note cards. Sunny tapped her pen. Jessica crossed her arms, lips tight. They had come prepared to corner him, but he'd spun the entire exchange into an advantage. One last time, Jessica tried to break through. So, if Trump himself, your former boss, is under suspicion, you'll go after him? Patel leaned in, not aggressively, but firmly. If the evidence leads there? Absolutely. From the President of the United States to the person in this audience, no one is above the law. Not on my watch. Silence. Then applause louder than anything before. The studio lights shone brighter. The hosts' confidence, once ironclad, had cracked. They whispered to one another. The tone had shifted. They didn't control the room anymore. And Patel? He sat perfectly still. Hands resting on the table. Face unreadable. Calm, not because he'd won, but because he'd never felt under attack. The room erupted. Applause thundered like a stampede. A pocket of the audience leapt to their feet, clapping, cheering, chanting. Let him explain. Let the man speak. One audience member cupped his hands and shouted, "He's making sense." Joy Behar leaned in, face flushed, voice dripping with acidic disbelief. Oh, you sound polished, Kash. I'll give you that. But let's be real, you chose to walk into those events. Places where people call the FBI the enemy. Now you're leading it? That's not brave. That's hypocrisy. The crowd quieted, slightly tense, ready. Patel turned to her. Calm, unbothered. As if he'd heard far worse and still didn't flinch. Miss Behar, I don't choose sides to score points. I choose dialogue to understand, even when it's uncomfortable. If we want to protect this country, the FBI has to know what's bubbling beneath the surface. And no, I'm not here to win applause. I'm here to do what's right, even when it's unpopular. Murmurs. A small wave of applause. Margaret leaned forward now, trying to strike a balance. Kash, I get that you want to listen, and I respect that. But even indirect associations with groups like QAnon can erode trust in federal institutions. What are you doing to reassure the American people you aren't influenced by those ideas? Patel met her gaze. His voice dropped an octave, calm, clear, commanding. Each word struck like a gavel. Griffin, trust doesn't come from speeches. It comes from what you do. Under my leadership, the FBI will pursue every credible threat, left, right, fringe, foreign, domestic, if there's evidence. I serve no cult of personality. I serve the Constitution and the people it protects. All of them. The room cracked open. Applause exploded, this time, full and unanimous, from several sections. Some stood again, cheering. A woman raised her arms and yelled. That's what leadership looks like. In the control room, chaos. Cut to commercial? No, don't. Let it ride. Look at the numbers. Whoopi, eyebrows raised, voice urgent but steady, tried to pull the show back on course. You keep invoking the law. That's fine. But don't you think your past associations, those moments close to conspiracy groups, don't they make people wonder if the FBI is now just another political arm? Patel didn't hesitate. His voice turned steely, measured, sharp, final. Miss Goldberg, politicization happens when we let emotion overpower evidence. I'm not here to play favorites. I'm not here to cater to any tribe. I'm here to protect this nation, and that means listening to everyone, even those some would rather silence. National security doesn't care what party you're in. It only cares what danger you pose. The crowd roared. Cheers echoed off the walls. Someone held up a sign, Truth, Politics. The director whispered, almost stunned. We've lost the room. Sunny Hostin, eyes darting to the cheering audience, leaned forward like a DA sharpening her cross-examination. So let me get this straight. If QAnon really is a threat, like your agency says, would you go after them with full force? No winks, no hesitations. Patel's reply came like a steel trap snapping shut. If QAnon, or anyone, violates the law, they'll be investigated. Thoroughly. Without prejudice. There are no safe zones under my watch. No political shields. No selective enforcement. The law applies to everyone, without exception. Half the studio stood. The noise was deafening. Applause, whistles, chants. Hands formed hearts. A man shouted, "He's got spine." A woman yelled. Where was this guy 3 years ago? In the booth, a frantic voice. We need to end now. The director stayed frozen, eyes locked on the monitor. No. This is the show. Patel sat stone still in the center of the storm, letting the cheers wash over him, but not reacting. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't playing to the crowd. He was simply there, composed, as if the noise had been expected from the beginning. And then, Sunny struck. Her voice was colder now, more methodical. She leaned in, her arms crossed. This was the moment. Mr. Patel, let's stop dancing. You say you're impartial, that you serve the American people. But let's talk facts. You once called for shutting down the FBI's headquarters and purging the agency of what you called the deep state. So tell me, is that reform? Or is that revenge against the people who dared investigate Trump and his circle? The studio went still. The applause stopped mid-clap. Everyone, audience, crew, even the hosts, held their breath. This was the question. The strike at the core of his credibility. Patel didn't rush. He didn't blink. He leaned slightly forward, his hands folded gently on the table, voice quieter than before, but carrying more weight than anything yet. You want honesty? Here it is. The FBI is a powerful institution, but power can be misused. When that happens, We must reform not to settle scores, but to rebuild trust. I never called for revenge. I called for accountability. If agents weaponize their authority for political reasons, they betray the badge, not me. This isn't about Trump. It's about trust. It's about fixing the rot without burning down the house. And if that makes people uncomfortable, good. That means we're finally asking the right questions. Dead silence. Not one word. Not one breath. Then, like lightning striking, applause. Massive. Unrelenting. From the back. Yes. Truth. Let him finish. Joy Behar leaned back, stunned. Sunny Hostin's lips parted, as if to follow up, but nothing came. Whoopi looked toward the producers. The earpiece crackled. Wrap it. Now. She nodded once. Tight-lipped. The narrative was slipping. The energy belonged to him now. Kash Patel sat unshaken, eyes scanning the table, not smug, not smiling, just present. Ready. Waiting. The battle wasn't over. But this round? He'd owned it. The moment Patel spoke, silence hit the room like a hammer. Miss Hostin, he said, his voice quiet but charged like static, reforming the FBI isn't revenge, it's responsibility. When an institution with that much power is accused of bending that power for politics, doing nothing is the real betrayal. Shutting down headquarters? That's not destruction, it's declaration. A declaration that the era of secret games and quiet corruption is over. You can't rebuild on a rotten foundation. Sometimes you have to start over. For a few long seconds, the silence held thick, heavy, almost sacred. Then, a single clap. Then a second. Then a dozen, growing, steady, defiant. Each one landing like a drumbeat. Sunny Hostin leaned in again, eyebrows tight, jaw set. A symbol, she said, her voice cutting. Sounds like you want to tear the FBI down, not fix it. Purge the deep state? That means fire everyone who doesn't kiss Trump's ring, doesn't it? Patel's expression didn't flicker. His voice, steel and steadiness. Miss Hostin, the deep state isn't a list. It's a behavior. It's a culture of unaccountable power. And no, I'm not firing people for their politics. I'm replacing misconduct with merit. Anyone who upholds the law, even if they disagree with me, I need them. I want them. But abuse the badge? You're gone. The audience stirred again. Soft affirmations, a smattering of applause, someone muttering. Makes sense. Joy Behar, toned sharp into a dagger, jumped in. You keep saying trust while calling your own agents gangsters. You've spent years tearing down the bureau. How do you call that reform? Patel turned slowly to Joy, his voice calm but sharpened to a point. I call corruption what it is. If someone in the FBI weaponizes their power against a citizen without due process, I don't care who it is, that's not service. That's sabotage. Reform doesn't weaken the FBI. It saves it from those who stain the badge. Applause exploded. Not polite, passionate. A cluster of people stood, clapping and cheering. He's right. Fix it, don't fake it. Jessica Mort, her voice rising in tempo, tried to regain ground. But Kash, closing the FBI's headquarters? That building represents law and order. Isn't that going to damage public trust even more? Patel didn't hesitate. Miss Navarro, symbols matter, but so does what they symbolize. That building carries Stephen's name. A man who surveilled civil rights leaders and blackmailed politicians. That legacy doesn't scream justice. It screams control. We need a new start. Not for politics, for the people. Applause again, louder now. The audience was no longer watching. They were with him. Margaret, poised, careful, but visibly skeptical, leaned forward. Her voice was velvet on steel. Kash, I know you want change. But you can't force it. Reform needs buy-in. If people think you're just politicizing the Bureau, how will you convince them otherwise? Patel locked eyes with her. His voice, a steady rhythm, like nails driven into wood. Miss Griffin, I won't convince everyone. That's not my mission. My job is to show the truth. Every policy, every decision, documented, explained, open to oversight. I won't hide behind politics. If people see we put justice first, trust will follow. Even if I'm not liked, I'll be believed. Roars from the crowd. That's leadership. Transparency over spin. The studio tilted entirely. The mood on set had turned. The hosts weren't just pushing back now, they were fighting gravity. Whoopi Goldberg, seasoned, sharp, experienced, cut in swiftly. But let's be honest, Mr. Patel. You've accused the FBI of bias again and again. So how do we know this isn't just retribution dressed up as righteousness? Patel didn't raise his voice, but it rang like a bell. Miss Goldberg, I don't have time for revenge. I don't lead with bitterness. I lead with truth. I want an FBI that defends even those who hate me, because the law isn't about emotions. It's about evidence. And if I pursue anyone, Trump, Biden, or a bureaucrat, you'll see the evidence in court. Not on Twitter. The room shook. People rose, chairs screeching, arms raised. A man in the front row shouted, "You're doing the right thing, Kash." Another, "This is how you clean house." Sunny, seeing the tide crash past her, jumped in again, voice urgent, pressing. "So what happens to agents who don't support your changes? Do you just fire them to keep control?" Patel's reply came like a trigger pull. Instant. Final. "I don't need loyalty. I need honor. If an agent disagrees but follows the law with integrity, I'll back them 100%. But if someone lies, hides evidence, abuses their role, they're out. That's not control. That's justice. That's the difference." And then it happened. The entire studio rose. No scattered clapping. A wall of sound. Chairs scraping back. Hands clapping. Names being called. Kash, Kash, truth matters. Fix the bureau. The producers panicked. "Cut now. Get control of this." The director, eyes locked on the monitor, only muttered, "We just made history." At the center of it all, Patel didn't flinch. He sat tall, focused, eyes forward, like a man who came into enemy territory and left with the crowd at his back. In the control room, the producer raised a hand. "Cut now," the gesture screamed. But the director didn't move. He leaned in instead, eyes glued to the monitors. Because sometimes TV doesn't create history, it catches it in real time. And right now, the fire was on the stage. Sunny Hostin, unwilling to yield, sharpened her voice to a blade and struck. "Mr. Patel, we've listened to you defend prosecuting journalists, reforming the FBI, your past with QAnon, your loyalty to Trump, but it all comes down to this. How do we know you're not just Trump's enforcer? Turning the FBI into a weapon against his enemies? Isn't that the real agenda here?" Patel didn't blink. He leaned in, slowly, eyes locked on hers. His voice dropped, not loud, but felt like a deep drumbeat. "Miss Hostin, when the press and politicians appoint themselves judge and jury, they don't defend justice, they silence it." The words hit the room like a shockwave. The crowd erupted. Applause. Cheers. Standing fists. "Say it, Kash. Speak the truth." But Patel wasn't done. His voice rose just enough to ride the sound. "I'm not here for Trump. I'm not here for praise. I'm here to make sure Americans live in a country where truth isn't bent by power. You want justice? Start by listening, not labeling." The crowd roared again. The studio shook. In the wings, a crew member whispered, "We're losing control of this." Whoopi, eyes narrowing, jumped in. "Kash, you say you want dialogue, but what we hear is control. FBI reform, media crackdowns, it sounds like silencing, not protecting. Don't you see how dangerous that is?" Patel turned to her slowly, gaze unwavering, voice cool and sharp. "Miss Goldberg, control is when people are afraid to speak. I want them to speak loudly, freely, as long as they speak the truth. Under my FBI, no one will be hunted for opinions. But if they break the law, they answer to it. That's not control. That's clarity." Applause broke out again, rolling and relentless. Whoopi's expression tightened. Joy Behar, rattled but relentless, snapped. You sound noble, but you called Trump's critics enemies. That's not unity. That's division by design. Patel turned, calm as ever, but his words landed like bricks. Miss Behar, disagreement isn't the enemy. Deception is. When people twist facts to manipulate the public, when power is used to obscure truth, that's the enemy. If calling that out is divisive, so be it. I'm not here to soothe lies. I'm here to expose them. The audience ignited. More rose. Some shouting, whistling. Keep going, Kash. Tell it all. Jessica Mort, fast, precise, struck back like a flash of steel. You say you pursue truth, but you've pushed conspiracy nonsense from Italy Gate to the deep state. How can we trust you won't keep doing that now that you lead the FBI? Patel didn't blink. His voice was cold fire. Miss Navarro, I don't chase conspiracy theories. I chase evidence. Asking questions when facts are murky isn't spreading lies. It's doing your job. My FBI won't be led by noise, only by truth. And the truth never needs decoration. Thunderous applause. The studio walls seemed to lean in with the audience. Truth. Truth. Let him lead. Margaret, calm but urgent, tried to bring balance. Kash, I know you believe in justice. But words like purge and prosecute scare people. It sounds like political vengeance. What will you actually do to prove that fear is unfounded? Patel nodded slightly, like a man who'd waited for this one. Miss Griffin, I'm not here to comfort every fear. I'm here to answer to the people. Every reform I implement will be public. Every investigation, grounded in proof, not politics. You don't have to like me. You just have to watch what I do. The record will speak. Loudly. The crowd went wild. Standing. Clapping. Chanting. Kash. 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 Sunny, down to her final card, leaned in with urgency. So do you at least admit your approach, from QAnon links to headquarters shutdowns, has damaged trust in the FBI? Patel turned slowly. His tone sharpened like a drawn sword. Miss Hostin, trust doesn't shatter from questions. It shatters when the truth is hidden. I haven't eroded trust. I've exposed why it was already broken. And if that truth makes someone uncomfortable, maybe the problem isn't the truth. Maybe it's the power they're afraid to lose. Boom. Silence for half a beat. Then, a tidal wave of sound. Cheers. Stomping. Applause that wouldn't stop. Camera operators froze. The director, still silent, just whispered. We're not filming a show anymore. We're filming a moment. And at the center of it all, Kash Patel. Still, unmoved, but in complete control. A man who didn't just survive the fire. He rewrote the script inside the flames. There was no more doubt, no more restraint. The studio exploded. The crowd leapt to their feet in a crashing wave of noise, applause, cheers, people yelling Patel's name like they'd waited years to hear someone say what he just had. At the host table, everything shifted. No longer the aggressors, just faces trying to regain composure. Whoopi smoothed her hair, blinking as if trying to reboot. Sunny Hostin bit her lower lip so hard it left a mark. Joy Behar tossed her note cards onto the table like confetti at the end of a lost round. Jessica Mort leaned in toward Margaret, both whispering like stunned attorneys at a trial gone sideways. They had expected Sunny's final blow to knock Patel off balance. Instead, he'd taken it, absorbed it, then set the room on fire with his answer. But this wasn't just about winning a debate. This was a shift in gravity. Patel's words didn't land like points, they landed like truth bombs, echoing across the room, igniting raw electricity in the air. He hadn't spoken like a politician. He hadn't defended with spin. He'd spoken with something rarer, conviction. The crowd didn't erupt because they agreed with everything. They erupted because someone finally said something real. Something brave. Something that cut through the fog. And Kash Patel? He just sat there. Still. Calm. No grin. No gloating. Just a steady gaze, as if he'd simply fulfilled a duty. Up in the control room, the producer waved again, rapid. Wrap now. But no one moved. The applause drowned out the floor cues. An assistant's voice buzzed through the director's headset. We've lost the narrative. The director didn't blink. He just watched the monitor, awestruck. No, he whispered. We've captured something we can't undo. They had intended to make Patel squirm, but instead, he'd turned the view into his stage. And now the hosts knew it. Whoopi took a breath, steadying her voice. She forced a measured smile, trying to recapture professionalism. We want to thank Mr. Kash Patel for joining us today. Let's just say, this conversation went beyond what we expected. Joy didn't look up. She gave the smallest of nods. The fire was gone from her eyes. Sunny sat back, arms crossed, saying nothing. Her expression was unreadable. Jessica and Margaret, for once, didn't try to land a final blow. They simply nodded, tight, quiet. An unspoken recognition that something unusual had just happened. Patel stood. Smooth. No theatrics. He gave a brief nod to the table, a polite thank you. But even in silence, his presence filled the room. And then the crowd on its own, without cue cards or signs, rose once more. Applause surged again, not for a winner or a side, but for a moment. For a man who had come not to debate, but to drop a challenge into the system itself. The show's theme music finally rolled. The cameras pulled back. On screen, text appeared. The View will return next week. But in the studio and in living rooms across the country, that wasn't the ending anyone felt. Because one line still echoed, louder than theme music, louder than applause. If the truth makes someone uncomfortable, they should ask themselves, are they afraid of the truth or of losing power? And in that second, one thing became clear, regardless of ideology. Kash Patel hadn't come for an interview. He came to shift the game board. And he did. The lights dimmed. The hosts retreated backstage, flanked by staffers and silence. But the energy in the room lingered. Thick. Unshakable. Patel didn't just leave a stage. He left a fault line. And as the final feed cut, the world took over. Within hours, the internet detonated. The hashtag #CashOnTheView surged past political trends, celebrity gossip, even the NBA Finals. Clips of the segment lit up every platform. Short bursts. One-liners. Standing ovations. One clip, Patel, steady as stone, saying, "We don't chase rumors. We chase evidence." Garnered 10 million views before midnight. Social media exploded with emotion. I'm not a Trump fan, but this guy, he said what we've all been thinking. This isn't about Trump. This is about truth. Dangerous. Charming. Calculated. He knows exactly what he's doing. He turned the View into a courtroom and won the jury. Disagree with him, but respect the clarity. It was divisive. It was explosive. But most of all, it was magnetic. People couldn't look away. Because in that studio, something had happened that's rare on television. Someone stopped playing the game and redefined the rules instead. The tremors didn't stop when the cameras cut. If anything, the real quake was just beginning. Across online forums, news feeds, and group chats, the reaction was immediate and nuclear. Social media lit up like a fuse, the moment spreading like a digital wildfire. Patel's supporters hailed him as a truth-teller, a man who walked into the lion's den and spoke without flinching. He wrecked the narrative. That wasn't a guest. That was a reckoning. His critics, equally loud, called him dangerous. Calculated. A wolf in principled clothing. Populism wrapped in patriotism. This is how institutions get hijacked, slow, smooth, convincing. But even those who opposed him had to admit, he didn't flinch. And he didn't just survive the View. He owned it. Even as hashtags exploded, #CashOnTheView, #FBIUnfiltered, #TruthOverTactics, the press plunged in like sharks drawn to blood in the water. Headlines screamed across platforms. Patel turns the view into a trial and wins over the jury. Controlled, calm, and unshaken, Patel's TV moment sends shockwaves. FBI director delivers dangerous rhetoric on daytime TV. A stunning breakdown of the media firewall. Networks reran clips. Analysts argued over tone, intent, meaning. Commentators from all sides dissected Patel's every pause, every sentence, every time he refused to blink. Some hailed it as a masterclass in message control. Others called it a threat wrapped in poise. But one thing was universal. It wasn't just television. It was a moment. Meanwhile, over at The View, silence reigned. Their official account issued a brief, almost clinical tweet. Thank you to Kash Patel for a lively conversation. But the comment section detonated. Supporters of Patel flooded in praising, demanding replays, calling it a victory for truth. Critics, too, lashed out not at him, but at the hosts. You lost the room. He walked circles around the table. Next time, be ready. Internally, the atmosphere was brittle. One insider whispered to media outlets. Joy Behar stormed out, muttering he was too slick for his own good. Sunny Hostin stayed in her dressing room, reportedly declining all post-show interviews. Whoopi, always the veteran, was overheard near the hallway saying to a colleague, "We underestimated him. That one's not playing games." Even behind the scenes, the verdict was clear. They came for a takedown. They got a turning point. And Kash Patel? He didn't post a thing. No gloating tweet. No victory lap. No follow-up interview. No podcast. No press statement. He returned to the FBI. Back to work. Back to silence. And ironically, it was that silence that spoke the loudest. In a world where everyone screams, he didn't need volume. He let the clip play. Let the people talk. Let the moment breathe. And it did. Because his message, when media and officials crown themselves arbiters of justice, they steal the people's voice, didn't vanish when the credits rolled. It spread. Across timelines. Headlines. Dinner tables. Podcasts. Political roundtables. Activist forums. Some repeated it with reverence. Others with rage. But all with the same truth. It hit. It wasn't a speech that solved every debate. It didn't convince everyone. It didn't try to. But it cracked something open, a door just wide enough to let questions flood in. And in a nation exhausted by noise and posturing, a man sitting still, speaking plainly, became the unexpected epicenter of a movement, if not in policy, then in possibility. That's why the story didn't end when Patel left the set. It had just begun. Because in a moment of cameras, chaos, and confrontation, he reminded the nation of something dangerously simple. One voice, spoken sincerely, can shake the room. And if the room is big enough, it can shake the country.